the morning my partner of 4 decades was gone. I stood staring at the empty space where his armchair had always been, and wondered how the world could keep turning without him in it. That was a year and a half ago. The grief therapist promised the sharp edges would dull with time. She never warned me that the quiet would sharpen, instead that it would grow teeth, creep into every room, and sit beside me like something alive. Nay, my name is Anya Sharma. I am 64 years old, and I am learning a language I never wanted to speak, the language of solitude, endurance, and survival. Leo had been the one who managed our world. The bills, the leaky faucet, the grocery orders when my arthritis made the store aisles feel like marathons. After he was gone, I discovered the landscape of our life together had been quietly eroding. The medical expenses had carved deep valleys through our savings. The insurance policy was a small stone that barely made a ripple in the funeral costs. Our daughter, Maya, lived in Portland, her life a whirlwind of career and friends. Her calls were monthly lifelines I clung to. Our son Rohan was in Florida, navigating the turbulent waters of his own young family. So, I did what felt like the only possible thing. I sold the home where we'd raised our children, whispered goodbye to every room, settled the remaining debts, and moved into a compact studio apartment in a neighborhood on the quieter edges of Chicago. Then, I found a job. At my age, with creaking joints and a resume that seemed to belong to another century, choices were scarce. But the Oak Haven Community Center for Seniors needed someone to manage the front desk part-time, and they were willing to see past the number on my birth certificate. The pay was humble, a little over $12 an hour, for 20 hours a week, but it was a tether to the world outside my door. It was a reason to put on clothes that weren't pajamas. Every weekday, I took the number 57 bus from my block to the center. The route wound through the downtown core, and I made a habit of stepping off 2 stops early, following my doctor's advice to walk for my joints, and secretly craving the buffer of open air between the bus's compressed silence and the day's work. That's how I first saw him. He occupied the same wrought iron bench outside the old city archives building every morning without fail, an elderly man with skin the color of weathered cedar and a close-cropped cap of silver-white hair. He wore a navy blue wind, its color faded by sun and countless rains. On the ground before him was a small, unassuming paper cup. He never solicited, never held out a hand, never made his presence a demand. He simply sat, a still point in the swirling city, observing the river of people with a calm, tired dignity. Something in his posture, the quiet set of his shoulders, reminded me of my uncle who had passed long ago. Maybe it was the way he held his head up, or the slight, acknowledging nod he gave to those who passed, even the ones whose eyes slid over him, as if he were part of the bench itself. The first time I stopped, my heart was a frantic bird in my chest. I simply bent, placed the $5 bill in his cup, and murmured, "I hope you have a good day." He looked up, and his eyes were a warm, deep brown, like rich soil. "Thank you, ma'am," he said, his voice a low, gravelly river. "May kindness return to you tenfold." I walked away quickly, tears stinging my eyes for reasons I couldn't articulate. It became our ritual. Each morning, I would pause at his bench. Sometimes it was a few dollars, sometimes just the loose coins from my pocket. Slowly, we began to talk. I learned his name was Elijah Jones. He was 76. He had been a middle school English teacher for nearly 4 decades before retiring. His wife Cora had passed from cancer 8 years before. His pension had vanished in a poorly managed fund that collapsed, and his rented room had been lost when the building was bought and demolished for a new development. Now, his nights were spent in the warmth of the shelter when a cot was free, or in the hushed, hidden corners of the city when it was not. His story settled in my chest like a cold, heavy stone. A man who had spent a lifetime opening young minds to Shakespeare and Langston Hughes, now reduced to a bench and a paper cup. The unfairness of it ignited an anger in me that had been dormant since Leo's diagnosis. "You shouldn't be out here in this cold," I told him one bitter January morning, my breath forming clouds between us. "You deserve a real home, Elijah." He just offered that same, gentle smile. "The universe works in its own time, Ms. Anya. It sent you, didn't it?" That's a grace note. I didn't feel like much of a grace note. A few dollars, a few minutes of conversation, but Elijah was always genuinely grateful, always asked about my day at the center, about Maya and Rohan, about how I was managing the weight of my own loss. In 100 small ways, without either of us planning it, he became my confidant, the only true friend in this unfamiliar chapter of my life. This rhythm continued for almost a year. Leaves budded, turned to flame, fell, and were replaced by a blanket of snow that eventually grudgingly melted into a damp, chilly spring. I received a small cost of living increase at Oakhaven. Maya called, her voice shimmering with joy, to tell me she was expecting her first child. Rohan sent a beautiful woven scarf for my birthday. Life was moving, a slow and steady current. Then, on a Tuesday in early April, everything changed. I stepped off the bus, crossed at the light, and headed toward the archives building. Elijah was there, but he was standing, leaning on the bench back, his eyes scanning the sidewalk with an intensity that was utterly new. When he saw me, he moved toward me with a speed that belied his years, his hand closing gently but firmly around my forearm. "Miss Anya," he said, his voice a hushed, urgent whisper. "Listen to me now. You need to hear this clearly." "Elijah, what is it? Are you unwell?" "It's not me." He guided me closer to the building's granite wall, away from the flow of foot traffic. "It's about your work. There's danger there." I stared at him, bewildered. "What are you saying?" "I can't explain it all here," he said, his grip tightening just slightly. "But you must be cautious. Watch the new finance assistant, the young man with the curly blonde hair. Watch how he handles the donation ledgers." He paused, and his eyes held mine with a seriousness that chilled me to my core. "NMS. Anya, do not go back to your apartment tonight. Stay somewhere else. A motel, with a friend, anywhere but there." "Elijah, you're frightening me. How could you possibly know about my job, about some finance assistant?" "People forget that old men on benches have ears," he said simply. "They speak as if we are ghosts. And what I've overheard." He shook his head, the fear now visible beneath the urgency. "Please, just trust an old ghost. Come back tomorrow morning, and I will show you. But tonight, do not go home. Promise me." His plea was raw and real. I promise," I heard myself say. He released my arm, the tension draining from his shoulders. "Good. Now, go to work. Be normal. Don't ask questions. Don't glance at any records. Just your usual day. I will explain everything tomorrow." He shuffled back to his bench and sat, folding into his customary pose of quiet observation. I stood rooted to this spot, my pulse drumming in my ears, trying to parse the surreal warning. The walk to Oakhaven felt endless. My thoughts were a swarm of bees. How? The Oakhaven Community Center was a modest, warm place serving about 150 seniors. We offered hot meals, exercise classes, book clubs, and a sense of community. The staff was a close-knit group of 12. The director was a woman named Helen Reed, who had been at the helm for a decade. She was beloved, efficient, and I had always considered her deeply ethical. The finance assistant Elijah mentioned was a young man named Colin Briggs. He'd joined the team for months prior, when the previous accountant moved away. He was in his late 20s, cheerful, with a mop of sandy curls and a ready laugh. Everyone found him helpful and capable. I had never given him a second thought. At my desk, I greeted members, answered phones, my smile feeling plastered on. My attention was fractured, constantly tracking Colin's movements in the open plan office. He seemed utterly ordinary, shuffling papers, typing at his computer. What was Elijah's warning based on? Midday, Helen emerged from her office and leaned against my desk. "Anya, can I ask you something in confidence?" "Of course, Helen." "Have any of our members or donors mentioned anything odd lately about their donation receipts? Perhaps any discrepancies?" My stomach did a slow, cold turn. "No, not that I've heard." What? She sighed, a small frown line appearing between her brows. "It's probably nothing. A longtime donor mentioned her year-end statement didn't align with her records. I'm sure it's just a data entry slip. Colin is reviewing it." "I see. Just keep your ears open, would you? Let me know if you catch any murmurs." She gave a reassuring smile and retreated. I sat very still. A donor discrepancy. Colin reviewing it. Elijah's specific warning. The pieces were too aligned to be chance. The afternoon was an exercise in contained anxiety. Every footstep near my desk made me jump. By 5 o'clock, my nerves were frayed thin. As I was gathering my purse, Helen's door opened again. "Anya, before you leave, a quick word." My heart plummeted. I followed her into the spacious office, the door clicking shut behind me. "Sit, please," she said, gesturing to the chair opposite her neat desk. She sat, folding her hands. "Anya, I need to speak with you about a sensitive matter. In my 10 years here, I've never faced something like this." She took a deep breath. "We have a thief." The words seemed to vibrate in the quiet room. Someone has been embezzling funds from Oakhaven. I've had suspicions for a while, but now I have confirmation. The donation records have been manipulated. Small amounts, cleverly siphoned over the last few months. We're looking at a significant loss. My God, I whispered, the shock genuine. I've already quietly engaged a forensic accountant. Helen continued, leaning forward, her expression one of grave concern. He verified it. Anya, I'm telling you because I trust your integrity. You've been a steady presence here, but I need your complete honesty. Have you noticed anyone accessing files they shouldn't? Asking unusual questions about our finances? Acting out of character? My mind raced. Elijah's plea to act normal, to ask nothing. Helen's trusting eyes. Could she be performing? Was this a test or a setup? I had no way to know. I haven't noticed anything unusual, I said, choosing my words with care. But I'm not involved with the financial systems at all. She nodded slowly. I know. That's partly why I trust you. The police will be brought in soon. There will be interviews. I wanted you to be prepared. I need to know I can count on your full cooperation. Absolutely, I said, my voice barely steady. Good. She stood, signaling the end of the meeting. Thank you, Anya. Get some rest. I left Oakhaven on unsteady legs. The police, an investigation, and Elijah's warning, now a siren in my mind. Don't go home. I did not go home. I walked 20 blocks to a small, aging motel called the Wayfarer Inn and paid in cash for a night. I told myself I was being paranoid, that Elijah was a lonely old man spinning conspiracy theories from fragments of overheard conversations, but a deeper, primal instinct held me fast to the promise I'd made. Sleep was impossible. One lay atop the scratchy bedspread, staring at the water-stained ceiling, replaying Helen's words, Colin's smiling face, Elijah's fearful eyes. At 2:17 in the morning, my cell phone rang. An unknown number. Hello, is this Anya Sharma? A male voice, official and calm. Yes, this is Officer Delaney with the Chicago Fire Department. I'm calling regarding your residence at 1824 Maplewood Avenue. There's been a fire. The world narrowed to a tunnel. A fire? Yes, ma'am. The building has been evacuated. We're checking on all residents. Are you currently at the property? No. I'm away tonight. That's very fortunate, he said, and I could hear the relief in his voice. The fire originated on your floor. Your unit has sustained heavy damage. It's not safe to enter. We have a temporary assistance center set up at the community hall on 7th. Do you have somewhere to stay? Yes, I'm safe. He gave me details, a case number, a phone line to call. I scribbled them down with numb fingers. After I hung up, I sat in the motel's dark silence, trembling from head to toe. Asterisk if I had been home. Asterisk Elijah had known. He had known. Dawn finally bleached the sky. I took a taxi straight to the archives building. Elijah was already there, pacing a small, anxious path before his bench. When he saw me, he rushed forward, his hands reaching for mine. You're safe, he breathed, and I saw tears glistening in the corners of his eyes. Thank the heavens, Elijah, I said, my own voice breaking. The fire, my apartment. How did you know? Come, sit. He led me back to the bench. From inside his worn windbreaker, he pulled out a small, composition-style notebook. I've been watching, listening, for weeks now. Ever since I heard something that didn't sit right. He opened the notebook. The pages were filled with meticulous, cramped, script dates, times, snippets of conversation. About a month ago, he began, his voice low. 2 people were sitting right here, having a conversation. They thought they were alone. They were talking about funds, large sums, being redirected from charitable streams. They mentioned Oakhaven by name. He looked at me, his expression solemn. They said the new guy in the finance office was perfect, that he followed instructions without question. My breath caught. Who were they? One of them, Elijah said, turning a page, I had seen before. Visiting your center, she'd come out for a smoke sometimes, talk on her phone. He carefully extracted a photograph from the notebook. It was blurry, taken from a distance with a shaky hand, but unmistakable. It was Helen Reed. She was standing with a man I didn't recognize, sharp-featured, with a severe haircut. I took this a week ago, Elijah said. I followed them. They met 2 others at a diner. He showed me another photo. Helen, the sharp-faced man, and 2 strangers. I think your director, Miss Anya, is not the victim. She is the architect. I stared at the images, the truth crashing down with terrible clarity. Helen's confession to me yesterday, it wasn't trust. It was groundwork. She was positioning me, a lonely, older receptionist with money troubles of her own, who tragically perished in a fire before she could be questioned about the missing funds. And neat, closed loop. She was setting me up to take the blame, I whispered, horror washing over me. I believe so, Elijah said gently. Last night, the same two men were back. They were celebrating, talking about a clean slate after a small electrical fire. They mentioned your name, your apartment number. I felt dizzy. We have to go to the police, now. Yes. He pressed the notebook and a cheap, prepaid phone into my hands. It's all here. My notes. These pictures are on the phone. It's not much, but it's a thread. Pull it, and the whole tapestry might unravel. I looked at this man, shivering slightly in his thin jacket, who had spent weeks being invisible on purpose to protect me. Elijah, why? Why would you do all this? Risk so much? He smiled then, the same gentle, transformative smile from 100 mornings. Because you saw me, Anya. Not a bench, not a problem, not a ghost, a person. You stopped, you spoke, you looked me in the eye and asked how my day was. In my 40 years of teaching literature, I tried to show my students that dignity is the soul's language. You spoke that language to me. When I heard those people plotting, I realized my classroom hadn't ended. This bench, this street, it became my new classroom. And you were my student in need of protecting. Tears streamed down my face freely now. You saved my life. And you, long before that, gave me back my purpose, he said, squeezing my hands. Now, go, be brave, and don't you worry about me. The following days were a whirlwind of stark offices, serious faces, and repeated questions. The police were initially doubtful of a homeless man's notebook, but the specificity of the information, the photos, and the very real arson at my apartment gave them pause. They launched a quiet, intensive investigation. What they uncovered was vast and sickening. Helen Reed's operation spanned for senior community centers across the Midwest. She and her brother, the sharp-faced man in the photo, had been systematically defrauding donation funds and government grants for over 6 years, amassing nearly $3 million. Colin, the finance assistant, was her nephew, placed strategically to manipulate the books. The fourth person was a contractor with a history of petty arson. My suspicion had been a fiction Helen created. She needed a plausible culprit before she shut down the Oak Haven scheme and disappeared with the money. My death in the fire was meant to be the final, tragic piece of the puzzle. They were all arrested within 10 days. The trial was a somber affair. I testified, my voice shaking but clear. Elijah testified too. The court provided him with a suit. Standing in the witness box, speaking with quiet, measured clarity, he was every inch the respected teacher he had once been. He wasn't Elijah Jones of the bench. He was Mr. Jones, educator, witness, hero. Helen received an 18-year sentence. Her brother got 15. Colin, portrayed as a pawn, received 3 years. The arsonist got The stolen money began the long process of being recovered and returned. But for me, the story's true meaning lay elsewhere. In the aftermath, Elijah vanished from his bench. Fear gripped me. Had there been retaliation I hadn't foreseen? After 3 desperate days of searching, I found him in County General Hospital. He had been admitted after a collapse, severe dehydration, malnutrition, and the advanced, untreated stages of diabetes had pushed his body to the brink. I sat by his bedside, holding his frail hand, weeping. This is my fault. I should have done more, sooner. Anya, no, he whispered, his voice thin but firm. You showed me kindness. That is a gift no illness can undo. You reminded me who I was. It's not enough, I said, a new determination hardening within me. Not nearly enough. I became a warrior for Elijah Jones. I navigated the labyrinth of social services, secured a pro bono lawyer to challenge the lost pension fund, wrote 2 newspapers telling the story of the teacher on the bench. The community responded. Donations poured into a fund set up in his name. His old school district held a charity drive. A local housing charity offered a subsidized apartment in a quiet building with a community garden. By the time the summer roses were blooming, Elijah was discharged into a clean, sunlit, 1-bedroom apartment. On the day he moved in, I brought over a pot of tea and a stack of books donated by the library. He stood in the middle of the living room, turning slowly, taking in the sofa, the bookshelf, the framed photograph of his late wife Cora on the side table. Anya, he said, his voice thick. You have built a palace from a seed of kindness. You saved my life, Elijah. This is just a foundation. He sat beside me, silent for a long while. Then he said, I used to tell my students, on the very first day, that stories are not just in books. We are all living stories, and the most powerful chapters are written not by grand gestures, but by small choices. How we choose to see one another, how we choose to respond. Those choices are like stones dropped in a pond. The ripples, they travel far beyond the drop. Ripples, I repeated, understanding dawning. Yes, he said, looking at me with those deep, knowing eyes. You chose to drop a stone of kindness on a tired old bench. Look at the waves it made. Look at the shores it has touched. I thought of the crooked path from that first $5 bill to this moment. Fraud exposed, criminals jailed, stolen funds recovered, a lost man rediscovering his home and his dignity. All from a simple, human impulse to acknowledge another soul. I am 66 now. The trial is a year in the past. Maya had her baby, a boy named Leo, after his grandfather. Rohan's family visited, filling my new, smaller apartment with chaotic, joyful noise. I still work at a senior center, a different one, and I am politely vigilant about financial procedures. I still take the bus, and I still walk the last few blocks. And every Tuesday and Thursday morning, I stop at a certain apartment building for tea with my dear friend Elijah. His health is stable now. He volunteers at the neighborhood youth center, tutoring children in reading, quietly sharing his love of words and his hard-earned wisdom. People sometimes ask me what I took away from the whole terrifying ordeal. They expect tales of caution, of hidden evil, of learning not to trust. But that is not the heart of it. The heart of it is this. Never underestimate the transformative power of a moment of genuine kindness. Never believe that a small act is insignificant. Every time you choose to see the human being behind the circumstance, every time you offer a word of respect instead of silence, you are dropping a stone into the universe. You are setting ripples in motion whose journey you cannot imagine. Elijah Jones was the invisible man on a city bench. I was a widow adrift in my own grief. Together, through a friendship built on mutual recognition, we uncovered a web of greed, stopped those who preyed on the vulnerable, and found, in each other, a profound and lasting companionship. All because one morning, I decided to stop and say hello. So, my advice, from my heart to yours, is simple. Be kind, intentionally, actively kind. Look up from your path and meet the eyes of those the world has taught you to ignore. That connection, that acknowledgement, is a force more powerful than you know. It can mend broken spirits, topple corrupt empires, and yes, it can absolutely save a life. It saved mine. As the final echoes of our story fade, I'm left thinking about the ripples we all create. If Anya and Elijah's journey touched your heart, if it reminded you of the quiet power hidden in our everyday choices, then you've already felt the ripple. This channel is a garden for stories just like this. One tale is of ordinary people, hidden strength, and the unexpected connections that change everything. I share new life stories here every single day. If you'd like to walk this path with me, to discover more of these hidden chapters, I would be so deeply honored if you'd subscribe and ring that notification bell. It's the simplest way to ensure you never miss a story. And now, I'd love to hear your ripple. Please, leave a comment below. Tell me where in the world you're listening from, and what time it is for you right now. I find such magic in picturing all of you, in your different corners of the globe, sharing this same moment of story. Your comments are the community that makes this channel feel like a home. Until our next story, remember, be kind, be curious, and never underestimate the power of seeing someone, truly seeing them. Two of our most beloved stories are waiting for you on the screen now. The choice of what to watch next is yours.